Hi, and welcome back to this channel. I'm Dr. Alan Johnson, and on this channel, I talk about the mind, well-being, productivity, and change for thinkers, makers, and everyone in between. Have you ever felt a really sudden, almost inexplicable sense of clarity while you were out walking in nature? Almost as if in that brief, indescribable moment, the world had faded away and you saw yourself and you saw reality a little bit more clearly? Well, that experience, which I'm sure we've all encountered in one way or another at some point in our lives, was at the heart of an entire philosophical movement. And that's what I wanted to talk about today. The philosophical movement known as Transcendentalism, which championed that sense of intuition over doctrine and nature over commerce, and perhaps most importantly, self-reliance over conformity. And transcendentalism today, even though we don't speak about it all that much, gives us quite a lot of really valuable tools to help us reshape our understanding of ourself, our understanding of freedom, and our understanding of the natural world around us. So in this video, let's begin with a little bit of a historical overview of who the Transcendentalists were. So it emerged in America in the 19th century as a reaction both against the rigid religious orthodoxy that had been unfolding, as well as the cold rationalism of the Enlightenment. And even though it emerged in America, particularly in New England, it was really heavily influenced by English Romanticism, by German idealism, and by Eastern philosophy, including, most significantly, Hindu and Buddhist thoughts. And central to the Transcendentalists was the idea that individuals can access higher truths, not through external authorities of state or religion or commerce, but through their own intuition and through nature and through self-reliance. And this was a movement that was spearheaded by a number of deeply influential writers and thinkers, people like Ralph Waldo Emerson, Henry David Thoreau, and Margaret Fuller. And these figures and many others saw society as it was in the 19th century as really stifling individual potential and enforcing conformity at the expense of authentic self-discovery. Sound familiar at all? Well, their solution was to cultivate an internal compass to help individuals navigate their lives beyond the dictates and demands that society imposed on them. There are a number of core tenets, and I'll be exploring these more in later videos, but there's a few that we can look at specifically today. The most famous, perhaps, is the notion of self-reliance and individualism. So in Emerson's essay, Self-Reliance, he writes, "Trust thyself. Every heart vibrates to that iron string." And this idea sounds simple, but at its time and even today continues to be quite radical. This idea of stop looking outside of yourself for validation and instead look inward and look for an internal sense of guidance, an internal sense of direction. And in practical terms, this means questioning our inherited beliefs and recognizing that our own internal subjective experience has intrinsic value. But this isn't just self-indulgence. Transcendental self-reliance isn't about isolation. It's about cultivating a really strong sense of who we are and making sure that we've developed our sense of selfhood so that we're able to engage meaningfully with the world outside of us. It's about developing the courage to act on conviction, even when it means going against the grain of what others around us are doing. Another important concept that Emerson introduced was the notion of the Oversoul. It's a kind of collective spiritual essence that links all individuals with each other and with the divine. And it echoes Eastern notions of Brahman or the Buddhist concept of interdependent origination, that we are all fundamentally interconnected. What it reminds us of, this idea of the Oversoul from Emerson, is that separateness is an illusion. This is a very non-dualist perspective that Emerson was writing about. And if you've ever had an experience in nature or listening to a particular piece of music, or when you're just in deep contemplation and you feel completely connected to something bigger than yourself, that sense of epiphany, well, that is what Emerson would refer to as the Oversoul. What this ultimately does is it begins to shift how we think about our relationships. Because remember, Transcendentalism isn't about retreat from the world, even though sometimes the great transcendental thinkers would separate themselves from society for a bit of time to gain greater clarity. Instead, what we're ultimately aiming for here is cultivating better relationships with others around us. And rather than seeing our relationships as transactional or competitive, that we are either going to do something for someone else to get something from them, or we're going to be nice to other people because we need them to be nice to us, Transcendentalism suggests to us that these types of expressions of care and unity point toward a much deeper vein of human experience. And when we recognize this, we begin to move beyond our most selfish concerns and toward a more honestly empathetic and authentic way of being. And the third main premise of Transcendentalism I want to introduce today is the idea of nature as a living scripture. So rather than getting our spiritual answers from a book or from a teacher, Thoreau's Walden essentially shows us how we can find inspiration and guidance from nature. Nature, for the Transcendentalists like Thoreau, was not just a resource to be exploited, not just places where we get our food and our natural resources. Nature was meant to be a teacher, a sacred text that we can learn to read by immersing ourselves in it. So when Thoreau went to that tiny little cabin at Walden Pond, he didn't retreat there just for solitude. He did so because he believed that nature reveals fundamental truths that civilization and society ultimately obscure. So how does this translate then into our daily lives? It means we need to remind ourselves not to engage with nature as an observer, but as a participant, not as an outsider or as an other, but as a part of nature itself. And in a world dominated by digital distractions and notifications and likes and pings, this practice is probably more important now than ever before. So there's a few practical applications we can take away from these ideas. First of all, resisting external noise. We live in an era where the algorithm shapes our attention, where institutions dictate our choices, and social norms that we inherit from childhood define what we believe success is and how we think we can achieve success and a sense of belonging in our community. But what's the transcendentalist response to that? Developing our sense of internal authority. So this could mean journaling to clarify our own thoughts rather than just passively absorbing ideas online. That goes for this video as well. I hope this video isn't just about you passively taking these ideas on because the algorithm put it onto your screen. I want you to reflect on these ideas and what they mean for you. A second practical tool that we can use here is reclaiming nature as a site of reflection. In modern life, we tend to experience nature in a really utilitarian way. We go to a park to burn calories, or we go to the beach or the mountains to relax on vacation. But Transcendentalism teaches us to treat nature like our teacher. So the next time you are outside in nature, and do it today, go out in nature today, I want you to not just look, but to observe, to notice the patterns that are emerging around you, the patterns that are emerging inside of you, noticing the thoughts and emotions and sensations within you, and noticing how your perception in that particular moment, your internal state of being and your internal frame of reference is being shaped and guided by the natural world around you. Allow yourself just to be curious about that, because in time, that relationship with nature will deepen and will expand in new and profound ways. And the last takeaway message from this video is to live intentionally. Thoreau famously wrote, "I went to the woods because I wished to live deliberately." And that's great, but we don't need to build a cabin in the woods to embrace this idea of living intentionally. It's about embracing what is most important to us and eliminating everything that's inessential and focusing on what truly matters. This could be something as simple as reducing the clutter in your life, whether it's physical clutter or mental clutter or digital clutter, or making decisions based upon your principles rather than just what's most convenient or what's most comfortable at the time. So Transcendentalism isn't just a historical movement. Obviously, it's studied at schools and universities as a historical movement, very connected to poetry and literature of the time, but it's also a living, breathing way of seeing, and we can continue to gain new insights from studying it. Transcendentalism is an invitation to trust ourselves, to engage with nature rather than just trying to take something from nature, and to recognize the boundaries between us and nature, the boundaries between us and others, and the boundaries between body, mind, and spirit. Well, these boundaries are probably more illusory than we like to think. If these ideas interest you, make sure that you subscribe and hit that bell button, because there's a lot more videos coming up over the next few months where we'll unpack these ideas in a lot more depth. And if this is the type of thing that might interest someone you know, share this video with them, because Transcendentalism hasn't been something that's been spoken about in a real, practical, applied way for a very long time. But as you're going to see in the coming videos, there's a lot of really important lessons that Transcendentalism teaches us to live our lives today better, stronger, and more in tune with those around us. I'll see you next time.